Rain hit the old tin roof like a warning shot. The wind howled through the cypress trees, whistling past the bones of what used to be a station house, its windows shattered like the dreams of the men who once passed through here. The chimneys smoked faintly, but no one had stoked a fire in days. Not since the last man bled out near the rusted pump, hand clutching a dollar coin he'd never spent. Jude Carroway crouched in the dirt out back, digging with his bare hands. Fingers raw, blood crusted in the grooves of his nails. He wasn't burying anything. He was remembering, and trying like hell not to. The earth here was soft from the storm, black and cold like the eyes of the men who had stood behind him at Antietam. Those same eyes followed him still, in dreams, in mirrors, in the quiet between breaths. He stopped digging when he hit something harder than mud. Just a rock. Just another reminder. He stood slowly, letting the rain wash the dirt from his skin. His rifle leaned against a tree, old, scratched, but clean. Everything he owned was clean. The inside of his soul, though, that was another matter. Jude didn't want company, didn't want coin, didn't want to keep running into men with badges and secrets. But still he took the bounty. Still he rode toward her. They said she was hiding in the ridge. A girl in tattered skirts, no shoes, carrying a rifle too long for her back and a satchel she wouldn't let go of. The sheriff called her just a mountain rat with a bad habit of surviving. But the money said otherwise. They wanted her back quiet or not at all. No trial. No talk. He rode hard that night, through sleet and pine, through memories he hadn't asked for. The wind whispered names he had buried, his wife's, his daughter's, his own. The horse breathed like a dying bellows beneath him, struggling up the slippery path that twisted into the woods like a snake, looking to snap. Then he saw her. She stood in the hollow just off the ridge trail, like a ghost the war forgot. Her dress was patched burlap. Her hands were blue with cold. And her eyes, wide, dark, watching, didn't blink even as he raised his rifle. "You lost?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer. "I don't mean trouble." Still nothing. Just her breath steaming in the cold. She had a raven feather tied to her braid, black as storm clouds and just as silent. Her satchel shifted slightly in her hand. Not from weight, from instinct. She was ready to run. Or fight. "I heard about you," Jude said, voice low. "They're saying you stole from the Weatherhall estate." At the name, something shifted in her face. A crack, barely there, like the surface of still water touched by a single stone. But she didn't flinch. "I didn't come to turn you in," he lied. She raised her chin, finally spoke. "Then why were you here?" The voice was young but heavy, roughened by smoke and nights without sleep. She sounded like the ridge, pretty when quiet, dangerous when stirred. Jude lowered the rifle. "Same as you. Just trying to make it through." "You don't look lost." He almost smiled. "Ain't been found either." Thunder rolled low over the trees. Behind her, something moved in the brush. Jude turned just in time to see the glint of a pistol in the dark. Two men, maybe more, creeping like shadows up the trail. They weren't here for firewood. "Down," he said sharply. The girl didn't hesitate. She dropped to the ground as Jude fired. The shot echoed through the ridge, like a bell tolling for the dead. One man fell. The others scattered. When silence returned, the girl stood slowly, not shaking, not crying, just watching him. "You knew they were there," Jude said. She nodded once. "Figured you'd need a minute to see for yourself." He walked past her and found his horse's reins had been slashed. Clean. Recent. If she hadn't slowed him, he'd be cold in the mud right now. He looked back at her. She was already walking away. Jude followed. They made camp beneath a crumbled rock shelf just before dusk. The girl started the fire with damp pine and a patience that told him she'd done it before many times. She didn't ask for food. Didn't thank him when he handed her jerky. She just nodded, chewing slowly, eyes on the flame. "Got a name?" he asked. She stared at the fire. "Don't matter." "Names always matter." She looked at him. Really looked. "Why do you care?" Jude didn't answer. He watched the flames flicker in her eyes. They sat in silence a long time. Owls cried in the distance. A wolf howled from farther off. At some point, she pulled something from her satchel. A piece of cloth. Torn, faded, stained with something dark and long-dried. She held it in her lap like it was made of gold. "Was my mother's," she said, voice barely a whisper. He didn't ask what happened to her. Didn't need to. Later, as sleep pressed down like a weight, Jude turned toward her and said, "I won't turn you in." She didn't respond. He didn't expect her to. He woke before dawn. She was gone. For a moment, he thought maybe he'd dreamed her, some ghost his guilt conjured up. But then he saw what she left near the dying fire. A raven feather. And beside it, drawn in the ash with a stick, a symbol. W. He felt the blood drain from his face. Weatherhall. He'd heard the name years ago. A fire in the South Valley. An entire estate burned to the ground. No survivors, they said. Just rumors of a daughter. A child. A girl who disappeared into the woods like smoke. If that was true, if she was who he thought, then the men hunting her weren't chasing a thief. They were hunting the last heir to one of the most powerful names the South had ever feared. Jude Carroway sat there long after the fire died. The wind moved through the trees. And somewhere far ahead in the hills, a girl with nothing left but a name was walking straight into a storm that had been waiting for her since the night her world burned. Snow fell slow, like ashes from a war no one won. The trees stood still beneath the weight of it, branches sagging with silence. Every step Jude took sank deep, the crunch of his boots muffled by frost and regret. A bitter wind whispered down from the ridge, carrying no birdsong, no animal cries, just the hush of things waiting to die. 3 days since she disappeared. He tracked her north through winding trails and forgotten creek beds, each one whispering more about her than she'd ever said herself. She didn't move like a child. She moved like someone taught to disappear, by fire, by fear, by need. At the crest of Elk Spine Ridge, Jude found the tracks he was looking for. Small boot prints staggered. She was limping now, likely frostbitten. And still running. Jude didn't know why he kept following. Maybe it was the feather. Maybe it was the way she didn't flinch when the bullets came. Maybe it was something colder, deeper, that part of him that never stopped looking for someone to save, even when he knew he couldn't. He followed her down into the low valley, where the river bent around a cluster of dead cottonwoods. Smoke rose faintly in the distance, not black enough for battle, but not blue enough for comfort. Campfire. He found her curled near the coals, wrapped in a blanket far too thin for the season. Her rifle lay beside her, barrel iced over. She didn't stir when he approached. He knelt. "You gonna shoot me?" Her eyes opened, cracked with sleep and snowflakes. "If I had the strength, I might." He smiled, brief. "Thought so." She sat up slowly, wincing as her weight shifted. Her ankle was swollen, her face thinner than before. Hunger had drawn new shadows beneath her eyes. He handed her half a biscuit and sat across the fire. Neither spoke for a long while. "You still following me for the money?" she asked finally. "I buried that reason a few miles back." She chewed in silence. "You're Weatherhall, aren't you?" he asked, low and certain. Her jaw tightened. "I don't care about your name," he said. "But I need to know what you're running from." She didn't answer right away. Just stared into the coals like they might show her something different this time. "My family didn't die in a fire," she said at last. "Not all of them." Jude watched her hands. They trembled, not from cold, but from something colder. "They came for my father first. Said he owed blood for land. Then they came for my mother. Burned the house with her inside. I ran through the back pasture. I thought I was fast enough." Tears clung to her lashes, didn't fall. "There was a man who helped me. Hid me for weeks. Said my name would get others killed. Told me to vanish." "But you didn't," Jude said. "No," she breathed. "I kept the name. I kept the truth. And now they're hunting it." The wind picked up. Snow sifted sideways, gentle as breath. Jude unbuckled his coat and tossed it over her shoulders. She flinched, then accepted it. "There's an old rail depot up ahead," he said. 2 days' walk if we take the ravine. You'll freeze out here." She looked at him, wary. I ain't doing this for glory, he said. And I ain't trying to save you. But I can't forget what it's like to lose everything. She nodded once. They walked in silence through the valley. The girl limped, teeth gritted. Jude carried her satchel when she let him, which wasn't often. Snow deepened, trees grew gnarled and thin. The second night, they found shelter in a crumbled supply station near the tracks, walls blackened from an old fire, roof half caved. She huddled by the hearth while he stripped pine bark for kindling. Do you ever regret it? She asked suddenly. The war? Jude didn't look up. Regret's a luxury for the dead. But you survived. He met her eyes. You call this surviving? She didn't answer. They shared a tin of beans and listened to the storm gather in the timbers. Snow fell through the broken roof like lost prayers. She pulled something from her satchel, an envelope, thick and weathered, sealed with red wax and the faint trace of a crest.
She didn't hand it to him.
Just held it. It's the land deeds. Letters.
Proof.
All of it. What are you going to do with it? I don't know, she whispered. Sometimes I want to burn it. Sometimes I want to walk into the governor's hall and drop it on his desk. Make them see. Make them answer. That kind of truth, Jude said, gets people killed. They're already dead, she whispered. Jude stared at the envelope. The seal had been pressed by the same hands that once signed laws into being. And now, a girl with blistered feet and no home held what could shake the valley. That night, he woke to the sound of her crying. Not loud, just broken.
He didn't speak.
Just shifted closer and placed his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. In the morning, boots steps in the snow.
Men.
5 of them. Bounty hunters. They crouched near the perimeter, rifles drawn, faces wrapped in scarves. One of them held a silver badge. Not law, private. They didn't know Jude was watching from the shadows above, rifle already trained. The girl didn't scream when he dropped the first man. She just took her satchel and ran. Bullets tore through the chapel ruins as Jude fired again. He moved like he had at Shiloh. Fast, brutal, no wasted breath. 2 men down. The rest retreated into the trees. Jude dropped beside her, breathing hard. She bled from a cut across her cheek. You all right? She nodded. He pulled the bullet from her arm that night. She didn't cry, didn't curse, just stared at the rafters like they might collapse and finally end it. When she slept, Jude sat by the fire and held the envelope. The seal was cracked. Inside, names, numbers, land claims, signatures. And a photograph, blackened at the edges, but still clear. A little girl. Her parents. A porch. A raven feather in her hair. He looked at the girl now, sleeping in ash and snow. No longer running. Just surviving. He placed the photo back inside. Then, with trembling fingers, he resealed the envelope and tucked it beneath her coat. Tomorrow would come. With more men. More guns. More choices. But tonight, all that mattered was the fire between them, and the storm that hadn't yet broken. Dawn came without color. The snow had stopped, but the cold settled deeper, not just in the bones, but in the earth, in the silence, in the way the birds never came back to this part of the ridge. Smoke still curled from the remnants of the chapel fire. Jude stood in the ruins, his rifle across his back, watching the girl lace up her boots with one hand. The other was bandaged, stiff, where the bullet had kissed her arm. She didn't look like a girl anymore. She looked like someone who had already walked through death, and kept walking. They didn't speak until the sun crested the ridge. Then Jude nodded toward the east. Rail Town's a half-day's walk. From there, you can take the track south. Start over. She looked up at him, and her voice was steady. I'm not going south. He studied her, but she didn't flinch under it. I'm going back. To Weatherhall land? To what's left of it. Jude's mouth went dry. He stepped closer. They'll kill you. They already tried. They failed. She reached into her coat, pulled out the envelope. This doesn't belong to me. It belongs to truth. That truth, he said low, will burn more than paper. She looked at him, and this time there was no fear in her voice. Then let it burn. They left by noon, took the old smuggler's trail through the canyons where red rock bled through the snow like old wounds. Jude walked ahead, rifle ready. The girl followed, steps sure despite her limp. By dusk, they reached the edge of the valley. And what lay below wasn't land. It was a kingdom carved from ashes. Fences wrapped in barbed wire. Men patrolling with rifles and dogs. A manor rebuilt atop scorched ruins. A new name on the gate, Shelby and Company. A front.
A theft.
They buried us,
she said.
and built their empire on our graves. Jude stared down at the house. You got a plan? She held up the envelope. This is the plan. No guns. Only if they start it. He almost laughed. Almost. They waited until full dark. Crept down past the old silo where she once played as a child. The field was overgrown now, wild and bitter. A single lantern flickered in the barn by the back entrance. No guards there, too quiet, too familiar. It was the same path her mother once took to sneak her honey biscuits in the middle of the night. She walked toward it, slow and silent. Jude followed. Inside the barn, the air was thick with hay and thyme. She stopped by a beam where a carving still remained, LW, 1867. Her fingers touched it, and then voices outside.
Fast.
Angry. The sheriff. He stepped into the barn, flanked by two men with shotguns and a smirk carved into his face like it was born there. Well, hell, he said. Look what the hills dragged in. Jude moved first, stepping between them, hand near his rifle. But the girl didn't flinch. She stepped forward. I'm not hiding anymore. The sheriff chuckled. You think showing your face changes what happened? Your family was corrupt. Land thieves. You were just a mistake. She held up the envelope. This says different. He spat on the floor. You think paper matters? Out here, truth's written in blood. Jude tensed. The sheriff drew first. The shot cracked like thunder in a cave. Jude dove, firing from the hip. The nearest guard dropped, his shotgun clattering to the ground. The second fired, grazing Jude's leg. The girl didn't move. She stepped forward as bullets flew. And as the sheriff raised his pistol again, she threw the envelope right at his feet. Open it, she said. The sheriff's hand shook. He didn't open it, because he didn't need to. He knew what it was. Behind them, a whistle blew from the hills. The rail guards were coming. This wasn't going to stay quiet. Jude, bleeding from the thigh, pulled her back. We have to go. She looked down at the sheriff, who just stood there, frozen in rage and fear. No, she said. Let them find him with the truth in his hands. They ran. Shots followed them out into the hills.
Dogs.
Lanterns. The chase was chaos. Snow, firelight, shadows moving like devils across the trees. Jude stumbled once, but she grabbed him, pulled him on. She knew these paths, knew where they twisted, where they sank. By the time they reached the ridge, the men behind them had fallen away. Only the wind remained. They collapsed by a creek as the moon lit up the frost on the pines. Jude's leg was bleeding bad. She ripped her sleeve and tied it off with shaking hands. You're losing blood, she whispered. I've lost worse. She pressed her forehead to his, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. A matchbook. One left. She struck it on the rock and lit the corner of the envelope. They watched it burn together. The ashes curled up like black petals, scattered into the wind. In the morning, she was gone again. No note. Just a single raven feather resting beside him. He smiled through cracked lips. And for the first time in years, he wept. Not for loss, but because something good had lived and kept walking.